The truth is, this shutdown is about the erosion of American democracy and the subversion of our most basic governmental norms. It is not normal to hold 800,000 workers' paychecks hostage. It is not normal to shut down the government when we don't get what we want. It is not normal for public servants to run away and hide from the public that they serve. And it is certainly not normal to starve the people we serve for a proposal that is wildly unpopular among the American people. Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their parents.
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father from his family.
Mr. Holman, with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're in the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important that we clarify that in order to have a humane immigration system, we do not require a militarization or cruelty to children. Asking that children not be caged and asking that human rights be respected does not mean quote unquote open borders. It means that we be a humane nation that respects our mission as one that guarantees liberty, prosperity, and the pursuit of happiness for all people who live on American soil. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary, for coming in and offering your testimony. Under the subpoenas that we issued to DHS, your office has produced to this committee data showing that child separation skyrocketed after your zero tolerance policy went into effect. More than 2,000 children were separated from their parents in the 2 months following your memo that Secretary Nielsen accepted, some for more than a year. In making these decisions around family separation and child separation, did you all consider the emotional and mental impact on CBP officers in forcing them to take children away from their mothers and fathers?
So we absolutely consider the well-being of our professionals who are strained with the crisis they're facing. They're strained with the stories they're hearing of the dangers of the journey, the abuse of women and girls on the process of getting to the United States.
Thank you, reclaiming my time.
We worry about that.
And do you believe, but did you consider the dehumanizing effect on the officers, specifically in child separation, in forcing them to take children away from their parents?
Enforcing the law often has emotional impacts for everybody involved, and that's something that they sign up for, but it's something we want to provide resilient services, mental health support for anyone who needs it.
Okay, and do you agree with the federal court's decision that halted your child separation policy?
I agree with the President's executive order on June 20th last year that...
But not the federal court's decision?
Of course, we've followed the federal court order assiduously.
There have been reports that President Trump and Stephen Miller wanted to restart mass child separations earlier this year, but top DHS officials, including Secretary Nielsen, told them that this would violate the court order. Is that true?
So the President said that zero tolerance prosecutions of adults crossing with family units is not on the table at this time.
So you are saying that it's incorrect, the reports are incorrect, saying that the President wanted to restart child separation?
I'm referring to the President's public statements on this issue.
But privately,
this is not on the table, not being considered.
So in your experience, the answer is no? He did not consider restarting child separation?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not going to speak about conversations with the President that I've personally had. I'm not aware of other deliberations between other officials.
Mr. Secretary, there were reports that the President offered you a pardon for closing the border to asylum seekers. According to a CNN report, senior administration officials told CNN that President Trump told you he would grant you a pardon if you were sent to jail for having border agents block asylum seekers from entering the U.S. in defiance of U.S. law. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've testified about this, answered this question in the media. I've never been asked to do anything unlawful by the President or anyone else, nor would I.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary, are you aware of the ProPublica report indicating that there were about 10,000 potential current and former CBP officers in the violently racist and sexist Facebook group?
I am aware of the ProPublica article, yes.
Did you see any of the posts in the report?
I did.
Did you see the posts mocking migrant children's deaths?
I did.
Did you see the posts planning physical harm to myself and Congresswoman Escobar?
Yes, and I directed an investigation within minutes of reading the article.
Did you see the images of officers circulating photoshopped images of my violent rape?
Yes, I did.
Are those officers on the job today and responsible for the safety of migrant women and children?
So there's an aggressive investigation on this issue proceeding. You've heard the chief of the Border Patrol, the most senior female official in law enforcement across the entire country, say that these posts do not meet our standards of conduct, and they will be followed up aggressively.
But those officers...
We've already put individuals on administrative duties. I don't know which ones correspond with which posts, and we've issued cease and desist orders to dozens and more.
Okay. Do you think that the policy of child separation could have contributed to a dehumanizing culture within CBP that contributes and kind of spills over into other areas of conduct?
We do not have a dehumanizing culture at CBP.
Okay.
This is an agency that rescues 4,000 people a year that's absolutely committed to the well-being of everyone that they interact with.
And
I don't believe there's a dehumanizing culture.
And Mr. Secretary, so you don't think that having 10,000 officers in a violent, racist group sharing rape memes of members of Congress points to any concern of a dehumanized culture?
Congresswoman, those posts are unacceptable. They're being investigated, but I don't think it's fair to apply them to the entire organization or that even the members of that group believed or supported those posts.
Mr. Secretary, just one last thing. How did 10,000 members join this group, including, I believe, the head of CBP? I'll double check. Including the CBP chief. How were they in this Facebook group without anybody knowing? Without anyone in leadership knowing?
Again, this is the subject of an ongoing investigation. If there was supervisory knowledge of unacceptable activities, that will also be considered and followed up on.
All right, thank you very much. It's good to see you, Mr. Zuckerberg. I think you, of all people, can appreciate using a person's past behavior in order to determine, predict, or make decisions about future behavior. And in order for us to make decisions about Libra, I think we need to kind of dig into your past behavior and Facebook's past behavior with respect to our democracy. Mr. Zuckerberg, what year and month did you personally first become aware of Cambridge Analytica?
I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was probably around the time when it became public. I think it was around March of 2018. I could be wrong, though.
When did Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg become aware of Cambridge Analytica?
I don't know off the top of my head.
You don't know. Did anyone on your leadership team know about Cambridge Analytica prior to the initial report by The Guardian on December 11th, 2015?
Congresswoman, I believe so, and that some folks were tracking it internally.
And
I'm actually, as you're asking this, I do think I was aware of Cambridge Analytica as an entity earlier. I don't know if I was tracking how they were using Facebook specifically.
When was the issue discussed with your board member, Peter Thiel?
Congresswoman, I don't know that off the top.
You don't know. This was the largest data scandal with respect to your company that had catastrophic impacts on the 2016 election. You don't know?
Well, Congresswoman, I'm sure we discussed it after we were aware of what happened.
Okay. You announced recently that the official policy of Facebook now allows politicians to pay to spread disinformation in 2020 elections and in the future. So I just want to know how far I can push this in the next year. Under your policy, using census data as well, could I pay to target predominantly Black zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election date?
No, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We have, even for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say and the general principle that I believe that...
But you said you're not going to fact check my ads.
We have, if anyone, including a politician, is saying things that can cause, that is calling for violence or could risk imminent physical harm or voter or census suppression when we roll out the census suppression policy, we will take that content down.
So you will, there is some threshold where you will fact check political advertisements. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, Congresswoman, yes, for specific things like that, where there's imminent risk of harm.
Could I run ads targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Would I be able to run advertisements on Facebook targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here. What's fair game?
Congresswoman, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think
So you don't know if I'll be able to do that?
I think probably.
Do you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political advertisements?
Well, Congresswoman, I think lying is bad, and I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad. That's different from it being, in our position, the right thing to do to prevent your constituents or people in an election from seeing that you had lied.
So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies? I think it's just a pretty simple yes or no.
Congresswoman,
I'm not talking about spin. I'm talking about actual
yes, in most cases, in a democracy, I believe that people should be able to see for themselves what politicians that they may or may not vote for
So
are
you
saying,
won't take
judge
them
their
down.
character for themselves.
So you won't take, you may flag that it's wrong, but you won't take it down.
Congresswoman, it depends on the context that it shows up. Organic post, ads,
Right.
the treatment is a little bit different.
One more question. In your ongoing dinner parties with far-right figures, some of who advanced the conspiracy theory that white supremacy is a hoax, did you discuss so-called social media bias against conservatives, and do you believe there is a bias?
Congresswoman, so I don't remember everything that was in the question.
That's all right. I'll move on. Can you explain why you've named the Daily Caller, a publication well-documented with ties to white supremacists, as an official fact-checker for Facebook?
Congresswoman, sure. We actually don't appoint the independent fact-checkers. They go through an independent organization called the Independent Fact-Checking Network that has a rigorous standard for who they allow to serve as a fact-checker.
So you would say that white supremacist-tied publications meet a rigorous standard for fact-checking? Thank you.
Congresswoman, I would say that we're not the one assessing that standard. The International Fact-Checking Network is the one who is setting that standard.
Thank you, Chair. So let's play a game. Let's play a lightning round game. I'm going to be the bad guy, which I'm sure half the room would agree with anyway. And I want to get away with as much bad things as possible, ideally to enrich myself and advance my interest, even if that means putting my interests ahead of the American people. So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn. Oh, and by the way, I have enlisted all of you as my co-conspirators. So you're going to help me legally get away with all of this. So, Mrs. Hobart Flynn, I want to run. If I want to run a campaign that is entirely funded by corporate political action committees, is there anything that legally prevents me from doing that?
No.
Okay, so there's nothing stopping me from being entirely funded by corporate PACs, say from the fossil fuel industry, the healthcare industry, big pharma. I'm entirely 100% lobbyist PAC funded. Okay, so let's say I'm a really, really bad guy, and let's say I have some skeletons in my closet that I need to cover up so that I can get elected. Mr. Smith, is it true that you wrote this article, this opinion piece for the Washington Post entitled, "These payments to women were unseemly, that doesn't mean they were illegal"?
Well, I can't see the piece, but I wrote a piece under that headline in the Post, so I assume that's right.
Okay, great. So, green light for hush money. I can do all sorts of terrible things. It's totally legal right now for me to pay people off. And that is considered speech. That money is considered speech. So I use my special interest dark money funded campaign to pay off folks that I need to pay off and get elected. So now I'm elected, now I'm in. I've got the power to draft, lobby, and shape the laws that govern the United States of America. Fabulous. Now, is there any hard limit that I have, perhaps Mrs. Hobart Flynn, is there any hard limit that I have in terms of what legislation I'm allowed to touch? Are there any limits on the laws that I can write or influence, especially if I'm based on the special interest funds that I accepted to finance my campaign and get me elected in the first place?
There's no limits.
So there's none. So I can be totally funded by oil and gas. I can be totally funded by Big Pharma, come in, write Big Pharma laws, and there's no limits to that whatsoever.
That's right.
Okay, so awesome. Now, Mr. Mirabani, the last thing I want to do is get rich with as little work possible. That's really what I'm trying to do as the bad guy, right? So is there anything preventing me from holding stocks, say, in an oil or gas company, and then writing laws to deregulate that industry and cause, that could potentially cause the stock value to soar and accrue a lot of money in that time?
You could do that.
So I could do that. I could do that now with the way our current laws are set up. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so my last question is, or one of my last questions, I guess I'd say, is it possible that any elements of this story apply to our current government and our current public servants right now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a system that is fundamentally broken. We have these influences existing in this body, which means that these influences are here in this committee shaping the questions that are being asked of you all right now. Would you say that that's correct,
Yes.
Mr. Mirabani or Mr. Schaub?
Yes.
All right, so one last thing, Mr. Schaub. In relation to congressional oversight that we have, the limits that are placed on me as a congresswoman, compared to the executive branch and compared to, say, the President of the United States, would you say that Congress has the same sort of standard of accountability? Is there more teeth in that regulation in Congress on the president, or would you say it's about even, or more so on the federal?
In terms of laws that apply to the president, yeah, there's just almost no laws at all that apply to the president.
So I'm being held, and every person in this body is being held to a higher ethical standard than the President of the United States.
That's right, because there are some ethics committee rules that apply to you.
And it's already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So it's even easier for the President of the United States to be one, I would assume.
That's right.
Thank you very much.